Mysterious death getting nationwide attention after attending a July 4th boat trip with friends and never returning home. Now, a Mississippi grand jury will determine if criminal charges will be brought after the family's private autopsy couldn't rule out foul play in Nolan Wells' death.
There were 300 to 400 people out on Horns Island. You mean to tell me nobody saw anything?
Any parent that would be in this situation, you would do anything to find out what happened to your child.
Joining us now, Nancy Grace, former special prosecutor and host of Crime Stories with Nancy Grace. You know, Nancy, Attorney Ben Crump there has a point. You mean no one saw anything? Where do you see this investigation and where things stand?
I've got a lot of problems with the investigation so far, but remember, we are seeing through a mirror darkly. We don't know all the evidence. There's been one state's autopsy, and that has not been released. The family sent the body of Nolan Wells for a second independent autopsy, and that autopsy says undetermined. But this is what I do know, Griff. I know on the back of his head, the occipital bone back here, there is deep red subcutaneous tissue. It's not anywhere else. It is not pooling of the blood once he's died. The blood pools at the lowest point. It's not that because it's only there. I'm curious, does that suggest a blow to the head? There are many accidental possibilities. When you look at the video out there, there are tons of boats. They're close together. Did he drink and drown in between one of those boats and nobody noticed? I don't know that. However, that deep reddening on the occipital bone is very disturbing to me. Also, you think, oh, he drowned, but we don't have the lungs. When the second autopsy got the body, the lungs and the throat were missing. Now, I understand, Griff, why they took the lungs to determine if he had drowned. But why was the neck missing? What about the interior of the throat sparked the initial medical examiner's concern? Was there some bruising on the neck? I don't know. So right now, it could go in so many different directions. But let me tell you this. The call that the friends made when they were returning without Nolan, they say he wanted to stay and be with a friend girl he just met. She, Katie, says, no, he left with his friends. I got a problem right there. That's the conflict in the testimony. But when you listen to the call the other friends made, they called SEATOW, S-E-A-T-O-W, and said, we're sinking. In this newly released sound, you can make out somebody saying, wake the F up. What does that mean? I'm not resting till I find out if that's real. Has it been doctored? And if it is real, who are they talking to?
There's so many questions that you raise, Nancy, and as someone who's investigating these things, you know which questions to ask. I want to take you back, though, because that marking on the back of his head is not insignificant, as you rightfully point out, because also the size of it, right? It's like a 12 by 8. I mean, it's not a small clue in this. Expand on that a bit, if you will.
Yes, that's perfect. Right there is showing exactly where the reddened tissue is, and it's subcutaneous under the skin. Now, as we all know, in an autopsy, the skin is pulled away from the body to look at the tissue underneath the skin. That's where the second medical examiner, doctor, found it. Many people are arguing it was a blow to the back of the head. Many people argue he fell, hit his head on the boat, and went over. Well, if that happened, didn't anybody see him? So it's going to boil down to witness testimony and what that neck truly reveals. Again, why did the first medical examiner keep that part of the body? It was not sent to the second autopsy. That raises my antenna. There's a lot of hate going on around this case. It's very hard to understand. Again, it could be accidental. It may not be. And we can't stop the investigation until we know. This young man was 18. You know how old my twins are? 18. And I would be lying on the front of the courthouse steps screaming for an answer till I got one.
That the autopsy result has been completed, but that information still hasn't been made public. Instead, prosecutors plan to submit it to a grand jury. According to a former prosecutor with the Hinds County District Attorney's Office, that's unusual unless investigators believe someone may have committed a crime connected to Wells' death.
What is the legitimacy of the audio? The word Bart is in there. And I know real people with real platforms are pointing the finger at your client.
Yeah, so we don't see any legitimacy in a doctored transcript or a doctored audio that comes with a transcript, which is a nice psychological sort of game.
Nolan Wells audio distress call. Is it real?
The audio obviously is real.
To you, Officer Tatum, you believe that there is an innocent explanation. My mind is open. And that innocent explanation would be what?
I mean, the bilge pump is damaged. They could have been saying, don't die, or is it dead?
Here's a question nobody official has answered yet. And once you hear it, you won't be able to unhear it.
Nolan
Wells's autopsy was conducted back on July 7th, but the state's actual, complete report, the one that determines everything else that happens next, was only just finished on July 31st. Officials confirmed it to NBC News themselves. And even now, complete, done, sitting in a file, the throat and neck tissue retained during that original exam still hasn't been released to the independent pathologist the family brought in. So what, exactly, is anyone still waiting on? Tonight, we're not chasing one theory. We're laying out every real contradiction sitting inside this case right now. The ones officials haven't explained, the ones commentators keep talking past, the ones that don't resolve just because a headline moved on to the next thing. A judge connected to this case has now seen a man arrested for threatening her family. A private towing company got turned into proof of a cover-up by people who don't seem to know what sea tow actually is. An enhanced audio clip got treated as gospel before a real forensic expert found it didn't even match the original file. And one friend who was on that boat is now under so much public suspicion, his own attorney had to go on national television to answer for him. None of these threads resolve on their own. Tonight, we're putting them next to each other, one at a time, so you can see exactly where they connect, and exactly where they still don't.
How did Nolan Wells die on Horn Island? The Jackson County Sheriff believes it was an accidental drowning. Now we've gotten the information from the state medical examiner's office that how did Nolan Wells die on Horn Island? The Jackson County Sheriff believes it was an accidental drowning. Now we've gotten the information from the state medical examiner's office that the autopsy result has been completed, but that information still hasn't been made public. Instead, prosecutors plan to submit it to a grand jury. According to a former prosecutor with the Hinds County District Attorney's Office, that's unusual, unless investigators believe someone may have committed a crime connected to Wells' death.
It makes you question, do they have a suspect or, do they not have a suspect? What is their end goal for presenting this case to a grand jury? Autopsy does not list the facts of what happened. It just looks at the body to determine, what happened with this body.
Attorney Davis says the grand jury could meet for months and in the end agree with whatever the findings say about the autopsy about how Nolan Wells died, or the grand jury could come up with a completely different conclusion.
It took 3 weeks. That's how long it took the state to go from performing Nolan's autopsy to actually finishing the report on it. Conducted July 7th, not confirmed complete until July 31st. Officials told NBC News directly, not the family, not Crump. Here's the contradiction, sitting right in the middle of that news. The report is done, but the throat and neck tissue the state retained back in July, the exact tissue that would show whether there's evidence of strangulation, still hasn't been released to Dr. Mitchell, the independent pathologist the family brought in, not because it's still under examination. The examination is over. It's just not moving. Ask yourself the obvious question. If the state's own work is finished, what is anyone still protecting by holding on to that tissue? There's a second contradiction stacked directly on top of the first. That completed report is now headed to a grand jury, the body that decides whether charges move forward. But Dr. Mitchell's independent findings, the ones that raised the original concerns serious enough to bring in oceanic engineers and audio experts in the first place, were built without ever seeing that state report or that retained tissue. One version of events is about to walk into a sealed room. The other version, the one the family paid for, may never get inside it at all. To be fair, Mississippi's district attorney has publicly explained why this process stays sealed. Professional conduct rules, protecting witnesses, standard practice for any unnatural death in that county. That's a real, legitimate reason. It's also true that standard practice and the family's own expert still can't see the evidence can both be true at the same time, and neither one cancels the other out. Drop your honest take below. Sealed for good reason, or should the family's own expert already have access? We're reading every one.
One fact doesn't automatically cancel out the other. So let us know what you think. Sealed for good reason, or the family's
Detail assistant, Vicky speaking. How can I help you?
You're reading every
Hey, we're at the... Detail assistant, Vicky speaking. How can I help you?
Hey, we're at the west tip of Horn, and our bilge pump stopped working. We're sinking. Can y'all please come? We have a membership.
All right, of course. How far is the work coming up, sir? Can you give me a description, angles?
What is the legitimacy of the audio? The word BART is in there, and I know real people with real platforms are pointing the finger at your client.
Yeah, so we don't see any legitimacy in a doctored transcript or a doctored audio that comes with a transcript, which is a nice psychological sort of game.
CETO is not a cover story. It's a real company. We need to start there, bluntly, because a real, verifiable piece of misinformation has been spreading through this case for weeks. The claim that CETO itself is fake, invented, staged, part of the cover-up. It isn't. CETO is a legitimate, nationwide private boat towing membership service. Think of it as roadside assistance for the water. It's not the Coast Guard. It's not 911. It was never supposed to be either of those things, and a lot of the "why didn't they call for real help" outrage online is built on people not knowing that distinction in the first place. Here's where the real, legitimate controversy actually lives. Not in whether the company is real, but in whether the audio being circulated from that call is. A digital forensics expert, Robert Freed, directly examined the enhanced version that went viral, the one TMZ pushed, the one with the disputed "wake the F up" phrase everyone's argued about for weeks. His finding, that enhanced version runs 20 seconds longer than the original recording and carries a different digital fingerprint entirely. 20 seconds of extra material in a file being presented to the public as an authentic enhancement of a real call. There's a second detail, Freed flagged, that matters just as much. The original recording, as released, had certain information redacted, account numbers, phone numbers, stripped out before public release. That's a normal, reasonable privacy step. But it also means whatever metadata lived inside those redacted sections is gone, which makes it that much harder for anyone to independently verify a chain of custody on any version built from it afterward. Brandon Tatum's position through all of this has stayed consistent, and it's worth stating plainly instead of letting it get lost in the noise. He maintains the original, authentic CETO recording, the real one, released by the state, doesn't contain anything nefarious, and that the enhanced, disputed versions are exactly that, disputed, unverified, and in Freed's own technical findings, demonstrably altered from the source file. That's not the same as saying nothing happened that day. It's saying that this specific piece of evidence, in its most viral form, doesn't hold up to the scrutiny it's been given. Does it change anything for you that the loudest version of this audio, the one...
This story isn't just about due process. It's not just about the truth. It is an ugly manifestation of rage bait and enragement on social media. And the family has been treated terribly. The friends of this kid and their families have been treated terribly. And now someone is fighting back against these people who get paid per click to create outrage. An alleged enhanced audio of the CTO call that purports to have a background conversation that is suggested sounds like people explaining the murder of Nolan. What is the legitimacy of the audio? The word Bart is in there. And I know real people with real platforms are pointing the finger at your client.
Yeah, so we don't see any legitimacy in a doctored transcript or a doctored audio that comes with a transcript, which is a nice psychological sort of game that people play with garbled audio. I'll tell you this. My client's role was to help drain water off of a boat that reported it being in distress. There were 20 plus people separated between those two boats. All of them saw what he did. All of them saw what did and didn't happen. There were 2 credible witnesses at least that saw Nolan Wells on Horn Island an hour and a half after those 2 boats left. And my client cooperated with the authorities from the very beginning, never required a warrant, allowed for the inspection of his boat, his GPS, his phone, gave list of witnesses, and answered every question that was asked. So yeah, people are just fabricating things wildly. And the consequence of that is that you've got people who are in legitimate fear for their lives. Our viewpoint is not, we can't stop the entire internet. But I think we believe that we can do enough to convince people that there are some potentially real consequences if you lie and it puts people in danger.
One name keeps surfacing inside the disputed audio, inside amateur transcripts, inside comment sections that have already decided who's guilty. Bart Edmiston Jr. His name is audible on the actual, undisputed recording. That much is real. What's disputed is everything people have built on top of that fact. Enhanced, unverified audio versions claim to catch a background conversation naming him in connection with something far more serious than helping with a boat. That claim got loud enough, fast enough, that his family says he's been doxxed. His information spread online, threats following close behind, over what they're calling outright fabrications. It got loud enough that his attorney, Russell Latino, went on News Nation, sitting across from Chris Cuomo, specifically to answer for a client who hasn't been charged with anything. Here's what Latino actually said, and it's worth hearing in full rather than the clipped version that's circulated. His client's role, according to Latino, was helping drain water off a boat that had reported being in distress, nothing more. He says roughly 20 people were spread across the 2 boats that day, and every one of them saw exactly what Bart did and didn't do. And then he made a claim that hasn't gotten nearly enough attention, that there are at least 2 credible witnesses who say they saw Nolan on Horn Island a full hour and a half after both boats had already left. Sit with that for a second, because if it holds up, it's one of the most significant claims in this entire case. Not because it clears anyone automatically, because it would mean the timeline everyone's been arguing about, boats leave, Nolan's alone, something happens fast, might be wrong in its most basic shape. An hour and a half is a long time. It's long enough for almost anything to have happened on that island that had nothing to do with anyone who'd already left by boat. We have to be honest about where this claim actually stands right now. It's an attorney's statement, made in defense of his own client, on a friendly televised interview. That doesn't make it false. Attorneys cite real witnesses constantly, and doing so is a normal part of mounting a defense. It also doesn't make it independently confirmed. Nobody outside Latino's own team has named these 2 witnesses publicly or had them speak for themselves, on the record, in their own words. To be fair to Bart specifically, since he's the one actually being named online without ever having been charged with anything, helping tow a distressed boat and being spoken about in an unverified audio clip are not evidence of wrongdoing. They're the exact kind of thin, circumstantial threads that turn into pylons long before anyone actually knows what happened. If those 2 witnesses are real, and Nolan really was seen an hour and a half after the boats left, does that change how you've been picturing this whole case? Tell us honestly.
Breaking news coming out of Mississippi. The case of Nolan Wells is getting its latest update and first arrest, as a man by the name of Joseph Alfredo Vasquez Dumars is now in custody after sending threats to Warren Hudson's stepmother and Judge Ashley Cole at the top of July. As you should know, Cole, whose stepson Warren Hudson is one of Nolan Wells' friends, whom he traveled by boat with to Mississippi's Horn Island before Wells would be found washed ashore 2 days later, would find herself under a large amount of ridicule after she would release a statement on her Facebook account. In her statement, she would mainly go on to defend her stepson against accusations that he may be behind Wells' passing. She would go on to write, My husband and I were not at Horn Island at any point on 4th of July. No one in our family is trying in any way to impede with the investigation by law enforcement or to otherwise hamper the family and law enforcement's quest for answers. Warren was interviewed by the Jackson County Sheriff's Department and cooperated fully. He saw Nolan last around 3 p.m. on July 4th. They left around 4:30 p.m. when the boat was taking on water and they had an issue with the bilge pump. Nolan made a decision to stay on the island and return inland later with another group of friends. Yes, I am a judge. I also value transparency. Yes, I am a judge. I also value transparency. I apologize if anyone was offended that I deleted my social media. There were no nefarious motivations in my deleting my social media. Social media has a lot of positives, but a whole lot of negatives.
While Nolan's own death investigation has stretched past 3 weeks with no charges against anyone, a completely different arrest connected to this case happened fast, genuinely fast. And the contrast between those two timelines is worth sitting with before we even get into the details. Joseph Alfredo Vasquez Dumarche is now in federal custody, charged with sending death threats to Judge Ashley Cole, Warren Hudson's stepmother, and, disturbingly, threats that specifically named and targeted her children, including threats to strangle them. Cole had posted publicly in early July defending her stepson, laying out his cooperation with investigators and the actual documented timeline of that afternoon. Within days, she says, her family started receiving a wave of threats through an anonymous account, messages describing a package being sent to her office, messages telling her that not even the FBI could stop what was coming. She'd later post that she was stepping back from media entirely, and, in a detail that adds real weight to how personal this case has always been, that she and Christine actually graduated high school together from the same community years before any of this happened. The FBI's Safe Streets Task Force traced the anonymous account back to Dumarce through email IP addresses linked to a specific email account, a date of birth, a phone number, and a street address, all connected to the same digital footprint. He's charged federally under the law covering interstate threatening communications, facing up to 5 years, a $250,000 fine, and 3 years of supervised release afterward. It's also public record, now that he's a charged defendant, that he has a prior conviction from 2018 connected to an attempted kidnapping of a minor, and that he's a registered offender released in 2023. Now here's the actual question worth asking. Because it's not the obvious, why hasn't Nolan's case moved this fast? That comparison is tempting, but it's not really fair once you look at what each investigation is actually built from. A threats case like this one runs almost entirely on digital evidence. An anonymous account tied to an email, tied to an IP address, tied to a real name, a real birth date, a real address. That's a chain federal investigators are extremely well equipped to follow, and it often resolves in days, precisely because digital footprints don't decompose, don't drift with the tide, and don't depend on dozens of partygoers agreeing on what they saw through a crowd of hundreds. Nolan's death investigation is the opposite of that on almost every axis. A body recovered after days in open water, a scene with no fixed cameras, hundreds of potential witnesses scattered across a barrier island, with weeks now separating the event from anyone trying to reconstruct it. Those two kinds of cases were never going to move at the same speed, even under a completely competent, good faith investigation on both fronts. That explanation is real, and it's fair, but it doesn't fully dissolve.
Any parent would want to know what happened, and she expressed that. But there are motives with Ben Crump and his history. There are lawsuits now suing his friends and social media companies fueled by Ben Crump. Do you think that he's helping this family or hurting them in their quest for answers?
Well, Katie, I think he's destroying the reputation of this family and also hurting this investigation. The fact that he put out the autopsy prematurely when law enforcement didn't even put out the autopsy it can convolute the investigation. because now when you interview witnesses, you don't know if they are saying things because they saw it on television or have they genuinely had an experience only they would have if they were actually there at the scene. And then also, I want to believe his mother. I don't have any reason necessarily, because I don't know her personally, to believe that she would just lie. But when I look at the facts, why wouldn't she communicate with with Warren and their family? They showed me text messages. They showed me phone calls where they called and reached out to her. And if I personally want to know what happened to my child, the first person I'm going to talk to is the people who last saw him alive. I don't understand why they take the position of saying it's us versus y'all. And now you want to subpoena phones and do things like that, which are going to take, I don't know, months for it to come out. And they may not even be granted. I mean, you got to think Nolan was an adult. He wasn't a kid. So some of these social media platforms may not even grant them access to his account if they don't have somewhat of a legal search warrant. So I just wish that they would have come together as a community and got to the bottom of this, got information, and then shared it to the public instead of, making it a divisive thing up front.
Yeah.
While
Nolan's mother went legal,
has now
not
gone
with a
on
press
for more than
conference,
3 weeks
with
without a
actual
single person
filed
being
court
charged.
paperwork.
Another case
Christine's
connected
attorneys
to
have
this
filed
story
subpoenas in
moved
Jackson
incredibly
County
fast.
Chancery Court
And
aimed
before
at
we even
5
get into the
separate platforms:
details, it's
Meta,
worth noticing how
Snapchat,
different those
TikTok,
two timelines
WhatsApp,
really are.
and Life
Joseph
360,
Alfredo Vasquez
the
Dumar
same
is now in
location
federal
tracking app
custody
Christine
after being
used
charged
herself
with sending
the
death
night she was
threats to
searching for
Judge
her
Ashley
son
Cole,
before anyone
Warren
official
Hudson
had
Stepper.
organized a search at
According to
all.
the charges,
According
those
to the
threats didn't
filings,
stop
what's
with her.
actually being
They also
requested is
specifically
broad,
targeted her
current
children,
and past
including
usernames,
messages
associated
threatening to strangle
emails
them.
and phone numbers,
Earlier in July,
display names,
Judge Cole
IP
publicly
addresses
defended
tied
her
to every
stepson,
account,
explaining his
and the full
cooperation
history
with
of communications,
investigators and
posts,
outlining what she
and
described
stories.
as the documented
That's a
timeline
real,
of that
serious
afternoon.
legal step,
She
not a
says that only
request,
days
a
later,
court-backed
her
demand.
family began receiving a
Let's
series
actually
of
break
threatening
down what
messages
each of
sent
these
to an
5
anonymous
subpoenas
online
is
account.
realistically
Some
capable of
messages
producing,
claimed a package
because
had
they
been
are not
sent to her
equally
office.
powerful, and
Others
treating
warned
them
that
like
even the
one
FBI
single tool
wouldn't be able to
misses
stop
almost
what was
everything
coming.
interesting
Later,
about this
Judge
move.
Cole announced that she was
Snapchat is
stepping away from
arguably the
speaking
most
publicly
important
about the
one on
case.
this list, and
She
here's
also
why.
shared a personal
Content
detail
that disappears
highlights
from a
just how
user's
closely
own
connected
screen
this community
doesn't
is.
necessarily
She and
disappear from
Christine
Snapchat's
attended
own
the same high
servers.
school and
The app is
graduated
built
from
to
the
make
same
things
local
vanish from
community
view.
years
That's
before
the
any of these
entire
events
premise of the
unfolded.
platform. But
According to
vanishing from
investigators,
view and
the
vanishing
FBI
from
Safe
existence
Streets task
are two
force traced the
completely different
anonymous account
things.
back to Dumar
If
using
Nolan's
digital
account really
evidence.
did get stripped
The
of everything from
investigation
that
connected
day,
email
the way
addresses,
Christine has
IP
described,
records,
a
phone
subpoena
number,
to
a
Snapchat
birthday,
is one of the
and a
only tools
residential
that could
address,
actually
all pointing to the
confirm whether
same
that
digital
content still
identity.
exists
He's
somewhere
now
on their
facing
end,
federal charges
even after it
under laws
disappeared from
covering
the phone
interstate
itself.
threatening communications.
Meta, meaning Facebook and
convicted,
Instagram
he
together,
could
is a
face
similar
up to
story,
5 years
though
in
slightly
prison,
different in
a
practice.
$250,000
Posts,
fine,
messages,
and 3 years
stories,
of supervised
and account
release after
activity
serving his
logs
sentence.
generally live
Court
on
records
Meta's
also
servers
show
in a
that
way
Dumar
that's
has a
technically
previous
recoverable,
conviction from
even after
2018
deletion on the
involving
user's
attempted
end.
kidnapping of a
The company
minor
has
and is a
processes for
registered
exactly
offender
this kind of
who was
law
released in
enforcement and
2023.
legal request,
Now, here's the
though how
question
fast
many
and how
people
completely
naturally
they
ask.
comply varies
Why
case
hasn't
by
Nolan's
case.
investigation moved this
TikTok
quickly?
functions
It's an
similarly to the other two
understandable
account
comparison.
activity.
But
Direct
once you look at
messages
how each
and
case is
content
built,
history
the
are
difference
generally
becomes easier to
retrievable from the
understand.
platform
A
side,
case involving
assuming the
online
account was
threats
active
depends
enough to
mostly
generate
on
a
digital
meaningful
evidence.
trail in the
An
first
anonymous
place.
account,
WhatsApp
linked to an
is
email,
where this entire
linked to an
strategy hits a
IP
wall,
address,
and it's worth
linked to a
understanding
real person,
exactly why.
a real phone number,
WhatsApp
and a
is
real home
end-to-end
address.
encrypted.
That's exactly
That's
the
not
kind
a
of
policy
digital trail
choice.
federal
The company can simply
investigators are
wait
highly
for a
trained to
sympathetic
follow,
case.
and
It's
cases
how the
built on
app
that
is
type
built
of
at a
evidence
technical
can
level.
often be solved within
Even with a
days.
valid subpoena,
Digital
even with a
evidence
judge's
doesn't
full
decompose.
backing,
It
WhatsApp
doesn't
itself
drift
often
away
cannot
with
hand
ocean
over
currents.
message content
And it doesn't
because the
rely
company
on dozens of
genuinely does not
witnesses
have
trying to
access to
remember
it.
exactly what
The
happened in
encryption
the middle of a
exists
crowded gathering.
specifically
Nolan's
so that
death
nobody but the
investigation
sender and
is almost the
recipient
complete
can read a
opposite.
message,
His
not
body was
hackers,
recovered
not
only after
advertisers,
spending days
and
in
not the
open
company
water.
running the
There
app
were no
either.
fixed surveillance
If
cameras
anything
covering the
relevant to
scene.
Nolan's final
Hundreds of
hours
possible
was
witnesses
ever
were
discussed
scattered
over WhatsApp. Specifically, a subpoena to the company is close to powerless to surface it. Life 360 is the one that hits differently, and it's worth pausing on why. This isn't a messaging app. It's the location tracking service Christine was using herself. In real time, the night she couldn't reach her son, watching a dot on a map, trying to will it into telling her where he was.
We're
A
not going to
subpoena to
pretend
life
it does.
360
A man
isn't
accused of
chasing a
threatening
deleted
judge's
message.
children was
It's
identified,
chasing a
charged,
location
and
history, a
taken into
record of
custody
exactly
within
where
days.
Nolan's phone was
Meanwhile,
and
an
when,
18-year-old
that could either
remains dead,
confirm or
and more than
contradict
3.5
every account
weeks
that's been
later,
given
no one has
publicly
been
about that
charged in
afternoon and
connection with
evening.
his death.
If the phone's
Both of those
actual
facts are
location
true.
data lines
Both
up
can have
cleanly with what the
reasonable
friend group has
explanations.
said,
And at
that
the same
matters.
time,
If
many
it
people
doesn't,
can still
that
feel
matters just as
uncomfortable
much.
with how differently
Here's
those
the honest
timelines unfolded.
limitation nobody's
That
saying
reaction
loudly
isn't
enough,
automatically
and it applies
unreasonable
across
simply
all
because
5 of these.
investigators have
A
practical
subpoena is
reasons for
not
the
the same
difference.
thing as a
Before we
forensic
finish this
extraction of a
section,
phone.
there's one more
It goes to
development
the
that's
company
worth mentioning,
asking for
because
what
it
their
offers
servers
at least
already
one
have.
positive
It's a
sign in
records
case
request,
that hasn't
not a
had many.
physical search of a
Warren
device.
Hudson's father,
That
who is
distinction
also
is the
Judge Cole's
difference between
husband,
asking
has
a bank for
personally
your
offered
account
a
statements
$50,000
and someone
reward for
actually
information
opening your
leading to
safe.
the arrest
There's
and
also a
conviction of
real-world
whoever is
timing problem that
responsible for
almost never
Nolan's
makes
death.
it into
That
coverage of
means
cases
someone
like
from the
this.
family connected to
Snapchat
Nolan's
has
group of
stated
friends
publicly,
is publicly
in
putting
general
up his own
terms,
money
that
in
it
hopes
aims
of
to
finding
respond
real
to legal
answers.
requests
Whatever
within 2 to 3
disagreements
weeks.
exist in this
That's the
investigation,
company's own
that fact
stated
shouldn't be
target, not
ignored.
a guarantee.
So here's our
And
final
critics of the
question for this
process have
section.
pointed to
Does
cases
the
where
explanation
responses have
based
taken
on digital
considerably
evidence
longer
make
than
sense
that.
to you?
Meta
Or does
doesn't
the
have a
difference in how
similarly
quickly
clean
these
public
two
benchmark.
cases moved
Response
still not
times
sit
there
right
have
with
been
you,
described
no
as
matter how it's
inconsistent,
explained? Tell
sometimes
us where you
fast,
honestly
sometimes
stand.
dragging.
We're going to get to the truth.
Thank you all for being here today. It has been 27 days since we have been able to talk to our son, to hug him, to tell him we love him. This has been the most difficult time we have ever had. I want to tell you who Nolan was. Nolan was a God-fearing, God-loving child. He loved everyone. He was the person who would just make you feel comfortable just being in his space. He was never one to exclude. He always wanted everyone to be happy, to feel good, to have purpose. He would lift anyone up. It didn't even matter if he didn't know you. If you took that moment to just tell him a little bit about yourself, what you wanted to do with your life, right then and there, Nolan would be your biggest cheerleader. Today, we are begging, because I'm not too proud to beg. We are begging, if anyone knows anything, his friends, strangers, please call the hotline, because we will not be able to rest until we get answers. But please understand that all of these distractions, these other questions that people, the attacks that people have sent our way, just know we will not be distracted.
That's right.
We are ready to do whatever we need to do as his parents to continue advocating for him, because Nolan is not here. He is not here to speak for himself. He is not here to tell us what happened. So again, we will not rest until we get answers. And if you know something, you need to let us know. Please do not be afraid. Okay? Thank you all so much again. We truly appreciate your love and support.
I'm faced with a new challenge every morning, waking up, trying to process this. It's the biggest challenge I've ever had. I pretty much was raised up like a lot of you. I didn't have a lot, but I always said I wanted to give my children more than what I had. And I think me and my wife did that. We raised Nolan to love everyone, be kind to everyone, because it was just the right thing to do. I got a lot of stuff going, but what I really want to say is, like my wife said, if you know something and you are really, if Nolan was really your best friend, or for the people who said that he was their friend, please come forward and tell us what you know. All we want to know is the truth. We're not blaming anyone. We just want to know the truth. Any parent want that. And Also, the disrespect that's been coming toward my wife and my family. For any parent, no matter what race you are, they need time to grieve. A parent can't grieve when you have people attacking them, attacking their jobs, attacking their character, just attacking them, period. Like, where's the empathy at? We, as Americans, this is a diverse country.
Yep. Yep.
Not no one race made this country. We all made this race, made this country. So we all need to come together. And like I said, if you know something, please come forward and just call our attorneys, give them information, and they'll take it from there. Just help us out. And not just us, but all these families. All these families need answers. Anyone with information on any one of these cases, please come forward. Because losing a child is something that you got to live with for the rest of your life. Thank you.
Nolan's mother chose to take legal action not through another press conference, but by filing official court documents.
The subpoenas.
Christine's legal team has submitted subpoenas in Jackson County Chancery Court targeting 5 different platforms: Meta, Snapchat, TikTok, WhatsApp, and Life 360, the same location tracking app Christine herself was using the night she searched for her son before any official search had even begun. According to the court filings, the request cover a wide range of information. They're seeking current and previous usernames, linked email addresses, phone numbers, display names, IP addresses connected to each account, along with the complete history of messages, posts, stories, and other account activity. This isn't simply asking for information. It's a court-authorized legal demand. Now let's break down what each of these subpoenas could realistically uncover, because they don't all have the same value, and treating them as one single tool misses some important differences. Snapchat is arguably the most important platform in this group. Here's why. Just because content disappears from a user's screen doesn't necessarily mean it disappears from Snapchat servers. The app is designed to make messages and photos vanish from view, but disappearing from the screen and disappearing forever are two very different things. If Christine is correct that everything from Nolan's account that day appeared to be gone, a subpoena to Snapchat could help determine whether copies of that information still exist on the company's servers, even if they're no longer visible on the phone itself. Meta, which includes both Facebook and Instagram, works in a similar way, although the process is slightly different. Posts, messages, stories, and account activity are often stored on Meta's servers in ways that can sometimes be recovered, even after they've been deleted from the user's device. The company already has legal procedures for handling requests like these. Exactly how quickly they respond and how much information they provide depends on the circumstances of each case. TikTok functions much the same way. Account activity, direct messages, and content history can often be retrieved from the platform itself, assuming the account generated enough activity to leave a useful record. WhatsApp, however, is a very different situation. This is where the legal strategy faces its biggest limitation. WhatsApp uses end-to-end encryption. That's not simply a company policy. It's built into how the service works. Even with a valid subpoena signed by a judge, WhatsApp often cannot provide the actual content of messages because the company doesn't have access to them. The encryption is specifically designed so that only the sender and the recipient can read those conversations. Not hackers, not advertisers, and not WhatsApp itself. So if important conversations about Nolan's final hours happen through WhatsApp, a subpoena to the company alone is unlikely to reveal them. Then there's Life 360, and this one is different for an entirely different reason. Life 360 isn't a messaging app. It's a location tracking service. It's the same app Christine was watching in real time at night, following a moving dot on a map while desperately trying to figure out where her son was. A subpoena to Life 360 isn't looking for deleted messages. It's looking for location history, a detailed record showing where Nolan's phone was and when it was there. That information could either support or contradict the public timeline that's been described about what happened at afternoon and evening. If the phone's recorded location matches what the friend group has consistently said, that's important. If it doesn't, that's just as important. Now here's an important limitation that deserves more attention. A subpoena is not the same thing as performing a forensic extraction of a phone. A subpoena asks the company for records stored on its own server. It doesn't involve physically examining the device itself. Think of it this way. It's the difference between asking your bank for account statements and someone opening your personal safe. There's another practical issue that often gets overlooked: time. Snapchat has publicly stated that it generally aims to respond to legal requests within 2 to 3 weeks. That's their stated goal, not a guarantee. Critics have pointed to other cases where responses took much longer. Meta doesn't publish a similar timeline. Reports suggest their response times can vary widely. Sometimes they're relatively quick. Other times they can stretch on for months, especially in high-profile investigations. So if you're wondering why such an important legal step might not produce new headlines anytime soon, this is the reason. Filing the subpoenas is the easy part. Waiting for 5 separate companies, each with its own legal review process, is the slow part. And almost all of that work happens quietly behind the scenes, without cameras or press conferences. We also want to be transparent about something else. There's a claim circulating online that some of these companies are actively refusing or blocking the family's subpoenas. We looked for reliable reporting to support that claim, and we couldn't find it. What has actually been reported is much narrower. Several of these companies simply hadn't responded to media requests for comment. That's very different from actively fighting the subpoenas in court. If you've seen a reliable source showing that any of these companies are officially challenging the subpoenas, send it to us. We'll cover it, but we're not going to repeat a claim we can't verify. There's one more important piece connected to all of this: toxicology. The state's toxicology results are still pending. And as we've discussed before, any alcohol findings have to be interpreted alongside the level of decomposition Nolan's body had already undergone before it was recovered. None of these subpoenas can answer that question. Toxicology is determined in a laboratory, not on Snapchat servers.
However it goes,
it's a completely separate part of the investigation that just happens to be moving alongside everything else. Looking at all 5 subpoenas together gives a clearer picture. Snapchat and Life 360 have the greatest potential to move this investigation forward if they produce meaningful records. WhatsApp is likely to reveal very little because of its encryption, and Meta and TikTok fall somewhere in the middle. They could be useful, or they might not. It all depends on what information still exists and how each company responds to the court order. There's one final technical point that's worth understanding because it applies whether these subpoenas produce results quickly or take months. Deleting something from a phone or an app rarely means it's gone forever. In many cases, deleted data doesn't disappear immediately. Instead, it's simply marked as available space until new data eventually overwrites it. That can happen within seconds, or it may take weeks. The same basic idea applies to company servers, where backups and internal system logs can preserve traces of activity long after users believe something has been permanently erased. And that's especially important in Nolan's case. Even if his phone appears empty from that day, as Christine has described, that doesn't automatically mean every piece of underlying data has disappeared everywhere. Phones often keep internal records showing that a message, photo, or file once existed and was later deleted, sometimes including the exact time it happened, even if the original content is no longer visible. A proper forensic extraction of the phone itself, not just subpoenas sent to technology companies, is the process specifically designed to uncover those kinds of digital traces. And that's another step this investigation still needs, alongside anything these subpoenas may eventually uncover. So here's our final question. question.
honesty,
Do legal
transparency, and
subpoenas like
respect
these
that they
make
would
you
expect
feel
for
the
them or their
investigation is finally moving toward real accountability?
Can we talk about the
Or
other
does
stuff?
it feel like Nolan's
went there, so
family
I
has been
feel like
forced
I
to
can-
carry out much
because
of
I've
the
been bothered by it.
investigation
We've
on
been
their
reporting
own
on it. It's
because they no
disgusting.
longer
I'm gonna start
trust
with one
anyone
thing,
else
and
to
then I'll
do
talk
it?
about the,
Tell us honestly
the
what you
harassment
think.
of you. The breaking news, the autopsy from Mississippi is in. And so what does that mean? When do you find out? Have you heard anything from them?
We were made aware that the autopsy was complete, because media started calling us, and I know the district attorney's office, they have reached out to the family, but we did not get a chance to talk to them before the news told us the autopsy was complete. We are scheduled to have a meeting with the district attorney's office next week. Whether that means they're going to reveal the autopsy results is unknown to us, but we're certainly going to inquire because, we have been begging for transparency the whole way, and we've tried to be very transparent with them, and we hope that they will be transparent with us, especially his family.
Yeah. So Ben, can they not release information to you? Because I know that, explain the process, because it goes to a grand jury. Now, do you know if they're going to be transparent with you, or you don't, and how much you think they can or will reveal?
Well, I think they can. They can do what they want. We do cases all across America, and the district attorney and the governmental authorities have the authority to release information as they so deem to release it. Don Lemon, they could be transparent, or they can say, well, we're not going to release anything until the grand jury. And then that means we don't know when we're going to see it, because nobody knows when they're going to conclude their report. And George Floyd and Breonna Taylor cases like that, where you had governmental authorities trying to be transparent, they would release information to try to build public trust. What are they going to do in Mississippi? We do not know if they're going to release it. They may say, we're not going to release anything at all until the grand jury, and the grand jury might convene. You just never know.
You said the grand jury might convene. You cut out for a second, Ben.
They can convene anytime the district attorney's office says that we've completed our investigation. It's all up to them. It could be next week. It could be 2 or 3 months. We have no control over when the grand jury is convened and when the district attorney decides to release information.
Okay. I know that it's difficult for you to listen to this, and I was keenly aware that you're in the background and you're having to deal with this. I wrote something this morning in my newsletter, and I said that, you have been wanting transparency around this. First of all, good morning. Thank you for joining us. But you've been wanting transparency around this. But hearing the actual words and the results or whatever, that is extremely difficult. You want transparency, but then to be able to hear it is heart-wrenching. It's really a double-edged sword.
It is. And honestly, it's one of those things when we're sitting in it, because we have not been able to fully grieve, right? So there's a bit of disassociation that occurs. And I too have to just always take a moment to step back and be like, okay, however it goes, right? Like it has to, in some way, like it has to be accepted. But again, I can't fully accept the answers and things that were told to us at the beginning because it was too soon. There was no investigation. Stories did not align. And so for people to say, hey, why can't you just accept it as a drowning and be done, and those things that have occurred. Mm-hmm. But, that's why we needed that independent autopsy. We needed to make sure that whatever was found was true. But of course, when you don't have the complete picture, that also, kind of makes you question even more, like, what exactly are we dealing with? And we need that. Like my husband and I, our family, we need those questions answered.
When you got the news that the autopsy for the state autopsy was done, what went through what was that like for you? What did you think?
I said, oh, wow. But then again, like Attorney Crump said, the DA did reach out. Actually, I had text the victim's advocate, Amanda, saying, hey, were there any updates with the autopsy? I know the coroner told us it takes about 2 to 3 weeks for the toxicology report to come back, which I know that was kind of the main thing they were stressing. And so then I think that afternoon, so today is what? So I think that was maybe a day or two ago, the DA had called and I missed the call. And by the time I saw it, it was too late and I wasn't going to call her at 9 o'clock because I've had to change the settings on my phones because of the harassing phone calls I've been getting.
I want to talk to you about all of that. But just one more thing before we go into that. I just spoke with Ben about transparency. What are you hoping from Mississippi, whoever's releasing this information, whether it be the medical examiner's office, the state, or the DA? What would you like from them? You want to hear everything, I'm sure.
I would like for everyone to just do their job. I would like for everyone to treat this as if this was their child or their family member and give us the same honesty, transparency, and respect that they would expect for them or their family.
Amen. Now, can we talk about the other stuff? You went there, so I feel like I can go there because I've been bothered by it. We've been reporting on it. It's disgusting. I'm going to start with one thing, and then I'll talk about the harassment of you, especially as a mother and then as a medical professional, and I know you take your profession very seriously when you said, I love everybody, black, white, red, green, it does not matter. So do not get that wrong. And you've always had really good reviews. But I want to talk about this blaming the victim and smearing the victim. The reports that we've been hearing. No, Nolan was drinking. He was doing this and he was doing that. Why, I guess we know why they're doing it, but I want to know what your assessment is, how you feel about that, because even, let's just say that he was, I'm not saying that he was, let's just saying that whatever he was doing, that doesn't mean that you have to die. Then that doesn't mean he was the only one.
Exactly.
And what do you think young people do? On my senior trip, I was, out there, right? So I'm just saying, kids have fun. So what does that have to do with anything? That's what I don't understand. What's your assessment on this?
Honestly, I feel like that is a way which we've seen this before, right? Pattern recognition. We've seen this where things have happened, especially when we talk about the Black community. And, after the death, it's a smear campaign. It's, what can we find out about this person? What can we say? And, that's something, my family and I, especially my husband and I, we definitely do not appreciate. But, we can't fight everyone that wants to have an opinion. But also, too, it's part of society that has been allowed to occur, which is it's gut-wrenching at best. Because if you were in our situation, how would you feel if there were millions of people who are saying, oh, hey, well, he was at an island, he was heavily drunk. And again, even with the drinking, there are so many conflicting stories, only because I have spoken with adults who knew Nolan very well, coaches that were out there. One in particular, I think he told me he saw Nolan somewhere between like 2:45 and 3:30. He was like, Christine, yeah, we talked for a while. We talked about college. We talked about his life, his plans. And he was like, he was perfectly fine. Because I think it had bothered him, too, that there was this narrative of, oh, he was sloppy drunk. Like and it started at the very beginning. It was, oh, he was sloppy drunk. And I'm like, but was he, though? Or is this a narrative that you guys want to use to kind of have us just accept that it was a drowning?
Mm-hmm. Are you prepared for whatever it is? I know that's tough. That's a yes and no question.
Honestly, it's hard to be prepared in any way with the way we have been thrusted onto the national stage and just kind of everything. And it's going to take a long time. So even, God willing, when we do get honest, transparent answers, right? Even when we get those answers, it's still going to take a moment, not even a moment. It's still going to take a while for us to digest and really accept that. Because again, and this is just me now speaking from a medical standpoint, we're kind of stuck in one of the stages of grief because we don't have answers. And that's the thing people don't understand. Everyone grieves differently. You hit those stages of grief at different times, and sometimes you feel like they might go on at the same time. But right now, we're kind of just stuck, and we can't move forward because we don't have answers.
So when you talk about all the things that have been spread, there is this officer, I hate mentioning his name, a former officer who is a far right wing, but who's been doing the interviews and has been saying, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not even going to comment on Brandon Tatum. No.
I respect that. And that's the right answer for everybody, I believe. And I feel like, because I mentioned him, I'm like, why did I even mention him? Because he doesn't deserve a platform.
No, he does not.
So let's talk about the people, the young men that he's been interviewing. They're saying they're his best friends. Some of them you said that you don't know. One of them even said, oh, Nolan would be outraged by the way his parents are handling this. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, why on earth would somebody go on and say that about a grieving family?
Again, distraction. We're not even going to address them or that man. We only want the truth. Again, at the end of the day, I'm going to say it like I've been saying it. The only question we have is what happened to Nolan. That's what we need to know. That's it. That's all.
Dad, you've been here. We saw you yesterday with not only speaking up for your son, but for others as well who have been involved in mysterious deaths. That was a very emotional moment for you and the vulnerability I saw there. What do you want to say to folks who are, your wife is getting, threats, she's being harassed. Those families have been treated like they're a nuisance by police departments, according to the reporting. What do you want to say to America about this?
Like my wife said, just from a parent standpoint, we just want to know what happened. We want a fair and thorough investigation, just like the other families, because we hurt just like them. If this was their children, they would want to know. They would want to go to every resource they can get to the ends of the world to find out what happened. So then that's all we're doing. We're not accusing anyone. We just want to know what happened to our son because it doesn't add up. Times don't add up, stories don't add up, and it just doesn't. So we just want a fair and thorough investigation so we can grieve properly because we can't, because there are so many answers, but so many questions that are not answered.
I don't know if you want to respond to this, or Ben or Christine. The father of one of the young men who's been speaking out is put up a $50,000 reward reportedly. What do you think of that, Ben or Elmore or Christine?
Yeah, we are happy with anybody who wants to share the objective to get into the truth of what happened to Nolan Wells. So we applaud it and we say, yeah, let's all work together to get answers because as we've said continuously, Don Lemon, adamantly. Somebody saw something. Somebody knows something. I mean, and that's what you want, are answers.
That blur together into one general feeling of suspicion. That's exactly the trap we set at the start we weren't going to fall into. So before we close this out, let's do something almost nobody covering this case has actually done cleanly. Sort every single thread we've walked through tonight into one of 4 honest categories. Confirmed, claimed, disputed, still unknown. If you can't sort a piece of information into one of those 4 boxes, you don't actually know it yet. You're just repeating it. Let's start with what's actually confirmed, the facts that don't depend on which side of this case you already believe. Nolan went to Horn Island on July 4th with a large group, on 3 boats. His friends left without him at 4:31 that afternoon, after reporting a mechanical failure and taking on water. His phone did not go with him. It stayed on the boat and made it back to the mainland. He did not make it back. His body was recovered 2 days later, on July 6th, along the island's shoreline. The state autopsy was conducted July 7th, but its complete findings weren't confirmed finished until July 31st, more than 3 weeks later. Nolan's neck and throat structures were retained by the state and were not present when the independent examiner, Dr. Mitchell, conducted his exam. That independent exam returned undetermined for both cause and manner of death. Joseph DeMars has been federally charged with threatening Judge Ashley Cole and her children, tracked down through a documented digital trail. Christine's attorneys have filed real, court-recorded subpoenas against 5 platforms. All of that is confirmed. None of it is in serious dispute by anyone on any side of this conversation. Now, what's been claimed, stated publicly, by real people, but not independently verified beyond their own account, that Nolan chose to stay behind voluntarily, to keep talking with a young woman he just met. That leaving phones on boats that day was completely ordinary behavior, not unique to Nolan. That 2 credible witnesses saw Nolan on the island a full hour and a half after both boats had left. A claim that, if true, reshapes the entire timeline and that currently rests entirely on one attorney's word in a friendly interview. That the friend group cooperated fully and immediately with investigators. Each of these is a real claim, made by a real person willing to attach their name to it. None of them have been independently corroborated by a neutral third party, on the record, as of tonight. What's actually disputed, meaning 2 credible sources are saying opposite things, and both can't be fully right. The enhanced audio itself, where a digital forensics expert found a 20-second discrepancy and a mismatched digital fingerprint against the original file, disputed by the very people who pushed it hardest online. The fully clothed detail from Crump's knock-up announcement, which the Cajun Navy disputed hard, tracing the confusion back to one ambiguous yes on cable news that its own source later said he should have corrected in the moment. Whether Tristan Shepard was genuinely Nolan's best friend, as he's described himself, or whether that framing is a stretch, as Christine has said directly and publicly. Whether the friend group's full, immediate cooperation with police is the whole story, or whether, as Bart Edmiston's situation shows, public suspicion moved faster and louder than any actual evidence ever did. And now, the hardest category, what's still genuinely, completely unknown, how Nolan actually entered the water. Whether he was conscious or unconscious when it happened, what's actually documented in the state's now completed autopsy report, since nobody outside that office, not the family, not Crump, not the public, has been allowed to read it yet. Whether the retained neck and throat tissue issue shows anything at all, since nobody independent has been given access to check. Whether the Tide Math Crumps team is investigating actually holds up, since those oceanic engineering findings haven't been released. What, if anything, the audio engineering experts will conclude about that disputed recording once real forensic tools are finally applied to it instead of amateur passes. Whether the joint phone investigation, multiple devices, FBI assisted, actually happens the way Attorney Hertz described, or stalls the way so much of this process already has. Here's why doing this exercise actually matters. Beyond just being tidy about it. Every single contradiction we've covered tonight lives at the seam between these categories. The place where something confirmed gets stretched into something claimed, or where something disputed gets repeated so many times it starts sounding confirmed to people who've only caught the headline version. The state autopsy being complete is confirmed. What it actually says is still unknown. That gap right there is the entire reason this video exists. The same pattern repeats everywhere you look in this case. The CTO call being real is confirmed. What's actually audible underneath the hold music remains disputed. Bart Edmiston's name being on the recording is confirmed. What that name being there actually means is, at most, claimed by people building a theory around a fragment. Dumartz's arrest is fully confirmed, documented, charged. Whether it tells us anything at all about who's responsible for Nolan's death, it doesn't. And treating it like it does is exactly the kind of category error this whole video has been trying to name. We want you to actually do this yourself. Right now, in the comments, pick one claim from this entire case, anything, any detail you've seen argued about online, and tell us honestly which of these 4 boxes it actually belongs in, not which box you want it to be in, the one it's actually earned. There's a reason this matters more than it might seem like it should. Every one of those 4 categories gets treated identically online all the time. Confirmed and claimed and disputed and unknown. All flattened into the same tone of absolute certainty, all argued about with the same intensity, regardless of how much or how little is actually behind any of it. That flattening is exactly how a case this serious ends up buried under noise instead of getting the careful attention it actually deserves. It's how a family looking for real answers ends up drowned out by people who are certain of things nobody has actually confirmed yet. Nolan Wells deserves better than certainty built on category errors. So does his family. So, honestly, does everyone else whose name has been dragged into this, the friends who were there, the judge who's had her children threatened, everyone caught in the blast radius of a case that still, tonight, doesn't have a confirmed answer to the one question that actually matters. There's one more thing worth naming before we move into the last part, because it explains why this sorting exercise isn't just an academic one. Watch how fast something moves from still unknown to basically confirmed in the public conversation around this case, and you'll notice it almost never happens because new evidence actually arrived. It happens because enough people repeated the same version of events, confidently, in the same tone, until repetition started doing the work that evidence was supposed to do. The fully clothed detail did exactly that for days before anyone traced it back to one ambiguous word on cable news. The phone back video did exactly that for over a week before Tristan Shepard corrected the record on national television. The pattern is consistent enough now that it's basically predictable. A detail surfaces, gets stated with total confidence by someone with a platform spreads faster than any correction ever could, and by the time the correction actually arrives, it's already lost the race. That's not a flaw unique to this case. It's how nearly every high-profile, unresolved death investigation online works now, in 2026, whether the underlying facts point towards something ordinary or something genuinely wrong. The volume and the confidence of a claim have stopped being reliable signals of how true it actually is. And that's precisely why we've spent this entire video trying to slow down and sort, instead of adding one more confident voice to a pile of them. Where this case goes next. Last thing before we move on. Genuinely, do you think official investigators should have brought in tied experts themselves months ago, instead of it taking the family's own legal team to do it? Or is this exactly the kind of detail that gets checked quietly behind the scenes without a press conference attached to it? Say what you actually think. We want disagreement in this thread, not a chorus. There's a sentence Dr. Roger Mitchell said publicly that deserves far more attention than it's gotten, because it reframes the entire question this case is actually trying to answer. Saying Nolan drowned, in Dr. Mitchell's own words, doesn't actually tell you what happened to him. Drowning can be the honest, technical cause of death, and still leave the most important questions completely open. Was he conscious when he went into the water, or unconscious? Was he forced in, or did he go in on his own? Those questions don't get answered by a cause of death at all. They get answered by everything around it. And right now, everything around it is still incomplete. That incompleteness isn't abstract, it's specific, and Ben Crump laid out exactly what's still missing at the podium. His team is actively working to coordinate with Dr. Mitchell to finally get access to the throat structures that were retained by the state and never released with the body. Alongside that, they're hoping to get Dr. Mitchell direct access to the photographs and observations made by the state medical examiner's office at the moment Nolan was first discovered. Because by the time Dr. Mitchell actually got his hands on the body, on July 10th, the airway and the lungs had already been dissected by the state's own examiner. Without that, Dr. Mitchell couldn't determine whether there was water present in them at all, which is one of the most basic physical indicators of whether someone actually drowned versus died some other way first. Sit with that for